Ça me fait toujours grand plaisir d'assister aux événements des anciennes de l'école de traduction. I've always been impressed by their commitment and their attachment to the school. And there's also a bit of a festive air about the events, for some reason, for the alumni of the School of Translation. I think this is the first year with balloons, but I hope that the balloons will stay, and they might lighten the air a bit of some of the other events that will take place in this room. So I had the honor of introducing your keynote speaker, Mrs. Donna Achimov, who is the Chief Executive of the Translation Bureau of Public Works and Government Services Canada. Avant de se joindre au Bureau de la Traduction, Madame Achimov a occupé de nombreux postes de haut niveau dans la fonction publique. Elle a été vice-présidente de l'apprentissage individuel à l'École de la fonction publique du Canada. De plus, elle a été sous-ministre adjointe des services aux citoyens et aux collectivités à Service Canada, où elle a su trouver de nouvelles façons d'offrir d'importants programmes et services à la population canadienne. She has extensive business expertise that includes cost recovery operations, client relations, and business transformation. She holds an honorary bachelor's degree in journalism from Carleton University. It's a great pleasure for me to welcome you to Glendon and welcome you to this event. Thank you very much for joining us.
Merci beaucoup. Bonsoir, tout le monde. Thank you very much for inviting me today. I was really thrilled when Andrew called and told me about your alumni evening. And I'm always energized in a room full of wonderful, energetic faces. And those of you who have started on your career, we're thrilled to hear from you. And those who are about to start your career, I hope that tonight I can give you a little bit of context and maybe some sage advice. And I say sage, I was saying to Andrew that my parents are in Florida, and my mother sent me an early email at 5:45 this morning saying, do you know what today is? And that's always a difficult question with a parent, regardless of how old you are. And we went back and forth, and I said I had to really leave, so if we could just figure out what today was. And she said it was my 25th anniversary in the public service. And I don't know how she knew that, and I didn't know that, but it just, I thought about that, and it seems 25 years, obviously, I know what you're thinking. They had difficult policies in those days. They did hire children, but but 25 years has come and gone, really. And as Andrew said, it's easy to look back sometimes, but it's been just a wonderful career. I've had incredible opportunities with the Government of Canada. And what Daniel talked about is certainly one aspect, and there are many more. I've seen this country from coast to coast to coast. Je suis privilégiée de parler les deux langues, d'avoir les homologues, les collègues partout au Canada et partout au monde. Et avec fierté, je suis ici ce soir grâce à tous mes collègues, tous mes patrons, et grâce aux citoyens. So I've been very pleased and honored to have the chance to work with citizens and to be here tonight. In terms of some context and some background, I have to say that I'm not new in terms of dealings with Glendon. As part of the official languages roadmap, when I was with the Canada School of Public Service, again, we had the honor and the privilege of working with Glendon in terms of having a pilot project and sharing our language tools with the view that perhaps equipping students at various stages of your university careers in terms of allowing you to have some sense in terms of what bilingualism is in a working context in the government. And so I was very, very pleased when Glendon submitted a proposal for that pilot, and as always was thrilled with the response and the reaction. And certainly when I landed in the Translation Bureau, I was thrilled with the various pilot projects and the successes that we have. And this past week, I had the honor of appearing before a House of Commons Standing Committee on Official Languages, and I was extremely nervous, not because I was going to be grilled, but because I had three of the best interpreters sitting in the booth directly in front of me. trying to make heads or tails out of what I was saying in both official languages, but I didn't want them sitting there and interpreting and thinking, how did we get her as our leader, and is she going to take us through this, all the challenges that we have ahead of us? And actually, I really, when looking at them and working with them, I always make it a point to go into that interpretation booth, regardless of where I am. And I want people to know that we're certainly appreciative of the work that they do, and it is incredibly important work, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And I had a chance to boast about Glendon in front of that parliamentary committee and on the record in terms of basically saying the work that you're doing and the results that you're achieving. And it really is a pathway finder for us. We're recruiting, and we have recruited from Glendon in the past, and we hope to continue to do so. And I know that we have some very honored former members of the Bureau who are here, and one of the Translation Bureau's veteran employees, Brian Moshop, also teaches translation courses here, and certainly Andrew Clifford comes from our interpretation side of the house, and it's a source of pride to have people populated a little bit in different organizations, people who understand the culture and who work with us, and people who are just such incredible leaders. So I couldn't say no when Andrew called, and in fact I was just thrilled. A little bit, I know Paul gave some stats in terms of what we all do, and I'm going to do that in a moment, but I do want to give you a bit of an outline of what I'm going to talk about tonight. So a little bit about the current state of our language industry, and I'm trying to explore a little bit about what that means in terms of gearing our business and working on our partnerships. Some trends that are on the horizon that I really think we need to speak about openly and we need to be aware of. Technology and what that means in terms of opportunities for the profession. And then the last part, I think my staff, as I was preparing, said, oh no, you're not going to deal with the touchy-feely stuff, are you? But I am going to talk a little bit about the profession, some deal breakers in the profession, and Daniel was very great standing up here. I think we're bon cop, bad cop. I'll be bad cop, and I'll talk to you a little bit about what some of the deal breakers are. And now I'm responsible for ensuring, for example, when the Prime Minister goes on trade missions, that the interpreters that are there, the translators that are supporting these trade missions, are representative of the best that we have in Canada. And believe me when I say this, there are reasons why I stay up some nights worrying about that. And there are reasons that I think we can work together to ensure that I don't have to stay up nights and that we have a great talent pool that's in the pipeline waiting to do some of that work. So the Bureau's role, just in terms of context, I won't go into a lot of detail. And again, my team didn't want me to say this, but we are the second largest translation organization in the world. And I said, so does that kind of make us like the evil empire? And if maybe I'm dating myself by saying that, and does that sort of make me Darth Vader? But I know we're big, and I know people say that we have the monopoly, and that our practices need to change, and that we've been in the landscape for a little bit of time, actually 75 years. And yeah, we do have to change, and that's part of my mandate, and I accepted it quite happily. Not to say that there were things that were wrong, but the world is changing. Our client demands are changing. Social media is forcing us to change. And you know what? There's some huge opportunities for us to partner. And as my grandmother would say, when there's no money, there's no funny. But if we all work together, I think that we can find very innovative ways that we can actually collaborate. And this afternoon, just talking to Andrew, I think we listed 3 or 4 very tangible opportunities where we could collaborate, and not just amongst the 2 organizations, but certainly with ALIA, the professional associations. I think there's lots of opportunities out there, and I'm hoping that you will be inspired with some of the suggestions and come up with some of your own. We have about 1,600 people on the payroll who are full-time and who work in some 60 points of service across the country. Our head office is in Gatineau, Quebec. On offre les services dans plus de 100 langues autochtones et étrangères. We have an annual operating budget of $220 million, and last year we generated about 170, and this year we're generating about $154 million. That's a big drop, right, from 170 to 154. I'll talk a little bit about that. This year we translated, and the year is almost over. In the next couple of days, we're still translating round-the-clock post-budget, but 1.7 million pages in all areas of federal government activity. That's highly specialized scientific, trade agreements, general agreements, all kinds of things. I'm just quite impressed by the depth and breadth and the variety of work that we do. And we provided translation and interpretation services for over 2,000 parliamentary sittings, parliamentary committees, and delegations. En tant que service de traduction interne du gouvernement fédéral, le Bureau confie une partie importante des services travaux au secteur privé. We contract with the private sector for about 35 to 45% of our workload, and that's going to continue to increase as we find the right balance in terms of what we make inside and what we buy. And this year alone, we've had over 1,000 individual contracts. And that's important to think about, because I do want to talk a little bit about the challenges in terms of us finding qualified groups of people to give contracts to and some of the trends. So as I mentioned, we certainly support students. That's critical for us. And every time in the Bureau that I celebrate major milestones and career achievements, I'm amazed to hear the stories of how people started as students. They've joined the Bureau, and many have stayed throughout their career, which is quite impressive, and have developed incredible areas of expertise. Others have migrated in and out, and I think that that's also wonderful. I'm not going to go into a lot of details about the state of the industry in Canada, because Paul touched on it, and he did a really good idea. Gave us a good overview. But I am really interested from une perspective de la relève et une transition entre les gens matures et avec une vision d'agrandir la population des traducteurs et interprètes. I think we need to think about where we're heading and what we need to do in the future. I've commissioned a report by PricewaterhouseCoopers to look at benchmarking, to be able to see how the Translation Bureau compares with other organizations, large ones around the world. How are people outsourcing? How are they dealing with secret documentation? How do they work with contractors? What are the best experiences that are out there? And I think as a new CEO and president, I have an obligation to be somebody that'll help a learning organization. And what's ironic with Price Waterhouse, we had a competitive process, and I had Price Waterhouse as a group that I wanted to benchmark us against. They have a huge interpretation and translation service, and I wanted to see how we compared with them, and they won. And so I said, well, I still want to compare with you and see how you're doing things. And I have to give them credit. They were really very open in terms of being able to give us access to some of their key people from around the world. So I am going to make that report available in public, because I think we can all learn from it. That report has basically told us a few things, that 22% of translation workforce aged 55 or older is in the workforce, as compared to 15% of the entire workforce. So it is an aging workforce. 62% of the workforce are in salaried positions, and 38% are self-employed, and approximately 50% of the salaried workforce are full-time positions. The rest are variations of part-time. Many companies in Canada that reach a certain level of capacity get bought out instantly by foreign ownership. Canadian-owned companies are slowly diminishing. Many of the companies here in Canada, unless they're of a substantial size and nature, are not investing in new technology, are not experimenting in technology, and are not involved in formal recruitment of young people and offering stages or co-op work assignments. I've picked out a few of those areas just to basically paint a bit of a picture. I held a webinar, a consultation. I invited, believe it or not, 8,000 micro, teeny tiny, small, medium-sized businesses to join in and have a bit of a dialogue with me nationally on February 23rd. And I have to thank Alia as a key contributor in terms of putting us in touch with key players. I thought it was important to hear the way private sector suppliers felt in terms of working with us in the Bureau. And as I said to Paul when I arrived, I was in my office and nobody called. Nobody called me for months and months on end. And I thought, isn't this strange? I'm in a brand new profession. Anytime I've changed, and I've done, when I ran call centers and mail processing centers, and when I did IT transformation projects, the second I was appointed, I had long lists of phone calls from suppliers, from people looking for jobs, from complainers, from conspiracy theorists. Nobody called. Nobody was talking to me. And I thought, you know what, I want to understand. Why is it complicated? Why is it difficult? Why is it that we perhaps put out some obstacles? And on the other hand, what are we doing really well? What works well with us? And what should we continue doing? And what could we be doing differently? So that was the first of hopefully many discussions that we will have in terms of working collaboratively with the private sector. And again, I heard many of the same concerns and issues that PricewaterhouseCoopers raised in terms of an aging organization, many aging organizations, people that were ones and twos and that couldn't afford to invest in technology or bring on new people, the ones and twos who wanted us to hire them permanently or semi-permanently. And so that worries me a little bit, because we have to think about the market. And what disturbed me the most was the ones or twos that said that they had to subcontract themselves to major firms, and that wasn't really effective, and that more and more government departments were optional. I forgot to mention that. So the federal government doesn't have to come to us for service, but more and more federal organizations are going out on their own and looking for lowest dollar bids. So I don't care about anything else other than the lowest dollar bid. And I mean, that's reality in most areas, but it is of concern. And some of these organizations are looking for major companies. They're not interested in doing the 1,000 individual contracts. So I have to think in terms of when we look at some of those trends, I'd like to think that some of you here who are gifted in collaboration, in networking, in virtual networking, and in technology, that you can maybe think about opportunities to be a little more entrepreneurial. And I know that sounds like a backhanded compliment, but why can't you align yourself virtually, physically, partially with others to be able to offer some really interesting, innovative approaches in terms of providing your services? I was saying to Andrew, I read a fabulous article a few weeks ago, and I have to locate it online, about a group of small businesses in Washington doing a whole series of lobbying, consulting, and these again were ones and twos, and they felt that they couldn't invest in healthcare, primarily insurance and some technology. And what they did was they banded together, and they just basically pooled resources so they had complementary aspects to bring to an alliance. So no one was competing with one another. Everyone brought just a little bit of a different approach where they were able to come together and actually bid competitively and do really interesting things, such as insurance and upgrading information systems and buying software. So I think that that's one challenge and one trend that I think that you need to think about as you leave here, that little bit of an entrepreneurial spirit and that spirit of networking and coming together. And of course, in this environment, many government departments are looking to do things differently, and they are watching their budget. And I'm not saying that it's all about lowest cost. Technology, we've seen the explosion. We've seen social media. I have to say honestly, last year when I joined, I couldn't really actually say machine translation and not face potential revolt. But guess what? I mean, that train left the station. We were really, really lucky that it slowed down and some of us were able to jump on that train. But guess what? Some of our clients are actually sending us machine-translated text, and they want us to revise and to review. And you know what? That's okay. That's really, really okay, because we do want people to think about both official languages. We want people to know that this document is important, that we want somebody to review it, but they've taken a stab at it and a crack at it. And I don't think that that's a bad thing. More and more government departments, ministers, budget yesterday, are tweeting, "Follow me." And guess what? That's real-time simultaneous translation, and we're good at that. I mean, we don't realize the cross between interpreters and translators and being curious with technology. I think we really have to think about some of that. It's a new market, and it means being curious, and you're curious, and you're a generation, and I'm stereotyping, but you've used technology, and you know it, and that's how you communicate. And I'd like to think that with that, you can really make a difference, and you can think about new markets and new areas that you can blossom into. So now some of the touchy-feely stuff. You know what? Clients have the opportunity and have the right to dictate what type of service they want, and what type of expertise they want and they need. And sometimes you deal with very high-profile clients, and sometimes you deal with a whole range of individuals. And more what I am seeing is that people want professionals. They want people who are individuals, creative, responsive. But you know what? Some of the eccentricity that makes us who we are, and that's a gift for us in our private life and in our friends' lives, really sometimes make it a deal breaker. When I'm assembling a key team of interpreters, and I'll just be very upfront, when we were looking at a delegation with the Prime Minister that took place a few weeks ago to China, it was a daunting task to make sure that we had the right core team of interpreters that were responsible, that were going to have the best possible approach and would represent the government in the best way. And that included our freelancers that worked with us. So it was really important that we had that mix of people who worked well with one another and who actually represented the country. I mean, yes, being behind the scenes, but also being in the situation where they were representing a really important part of the profession. And you know what? Trade doesn't happen unless we have talented, capable people. I'm going to end by saying that the bad part was the drugs. That's a deal breaker. I'm not going to preach here, but I'm just saying that in many professions it's a deal breaker. But when you look at some of the very high profile and exciting work that we have, it is a deal breaker. So don't apply, and don't even get to see Daniel. And don't think about a career in high stakes interpretation and translation. And that's what the world is going to be about. It is going to be high stakes, and we are going to be doing incredible things and opening up our trade agreements. And I think that there's a world ahead of you. So I'm going to end by saying I'm very proud to be here, and I know that you're all going to be doing. You're all going to be doing it well as you move off into the future. And I do want to leave you with one thought. My one criticism, perhaps, is you're not promoting yourself enough. And I spoke to Andrew about, maybe he's going to help me, about how can we find creative ways to help you promote. And I want to show you a short 30-second commercial that the province of New Brunswick pulled together to promote the translation industry. It's 30 seconds. It was sponsored by us as part of the Official Languages Roadmap. And it's just one really neat example. And I want to challenge you, and I challenged Andrew, and I know that Alia is thinking about this as well. I really, really think that there are opportunities for us to use our creativity and to showcase the best of this profession and the best of all of you in the room. So I hope this will inspire you a little bit.
Every day, Miriam translates our ideas, our values, and our impressions. In New Brunswick, translators mean a lot.
This ad was so successful that the Nursing Association New Brunswick actually did a parody, and I guess the best form of the best compliment is when you are copied, and the tagline was "En Nouveau-Brunswick, d'être une infirmière, ça va être quelqu'un." So being a nurse is really something. So I challenge you to think about ways to promote your profession. It's an incredible profession, and I wish you all luck as you continue to leave here and work towards your goals. Thank you very much for having me.